top secret during the search. CBS's Robert Costa and Catherine Herridge are here with more details. Bob, I'll start with you. What does this search warrant tell us? What doesn't it tell us?
I've been reviewing the search warrant and the related documents with Catherine and our colleagues here at CBS News. As you said, the FBI searched the former president's home earlier this week in Florida, and they found 4 sets of top secret documents. And there's one set of documents that has been marked TS-SCI, TS meaning top secret, and SCI meaning sensitive compartmented information, highly classified material, part of an ongoing federal investigation of how the former president handled materials he brought from the White House to his Florida estate.
And in those boxes, they found things like photos, information about the president of France. What does this, give us a glimpse into what the president actually may have had there at Mar-a-Lago? What
we've learned from this warrant that has been unsealed, the former president did not contest it being unsealed by a federal judge today, is pretty limited. But we do know that the intent of this investigation is about looking into how he handled documents, and the Espionage Act, which you mentioned, is very important because it's illegal to gather or transmit or lose important national security documents, defense information, and there's a concern from the investigative side that the former president in some way was cavalier with these documents once he left the White House, but we're not learning an enormous amount of information. In other words, we're learning the search warrant, which is in a sense the outline of what the FBI did to go into Mar-a-Lago, but we haven't seen the affidavit, the underlying foundational evidence that ultimately led to a subpoena and then an FBI search.
That would tell us a lot more. But Catherine, give us a sense of what we now know about the potential crimes that the FBI may be investigating.
Well, Nancy, I think this is really a window into the potential criminal violations that President Trump is facing. There's one which is USC 793, and that's the gathering and the loss of national defense information. So think about things like Navy vessels, weapon systems, satellite networks. That would be the kind of thing that they're talking about. The second is 18 USC 2071, which is the concealment, removal, and mutilation of records. So on its face, that's a violation of this Presidential Records Act, where every president has to preserve the records for the National Archives. And then the last one is 18 USC 1519, and this is essentially a falsification or an obstruction charge. So those are the 3. We've got these 2 sort of national security information charges or violations. One is the Espionage Act, and then the last is basically a boilerplate obstruction charge.
So pretty serious charges.
Absolutely.
And now that we've seen the search warrant, what everyone wants to see, you brought it up, Robert, is the affidavit itself, which would give us a lot more information. How likely are we to see that affidavit when we're in the middle of an investigation? I know the fact that this search warrant has been unsealed is pretty unusual.
In the 20 years that I've worked in this area, covering FBI and the Justice Department, I've never seen a case like this. It's highly unusual to unseal a search warrant, and to take it a step further, it would be even more unusual to see the affidavit made public. But I say that because a number of media organizations, including CBS News, is seeking the unsealing of that affidavit. And the affidavit is sort of a fancy term, but it's basically a sworn statement from an agent saying, this is the evidence that we gathered, which gave us probable cause, judge, to execute a search warrant on a former president's residence.
Bob, we've gotten a statement from a spokesman for President Trump. It says, in part, the raid of President Trump's home was not just unprecedented, but unnecessary. And now they are leaking lies and innuendos to try to explain away the weaponization of government against their dominant political opponent, essentially accusing the FBI of being some sort of handmaiden of President Trump's political opponents.
There has been a collapse in the relationship between the Trump legal team and the Trump political advisors and the Justice Department during this investigation. The chronology here is important to remember. It was back in the spring that it became clear that there was an ongoing investigation into the former president's handling of documents. There was a grand jury that issued a subpoena for more information. Then in June, there was a somewhat pleasant exchange at Mar-a-Lago between federal investigators and the president's lawyers. But between June, that meeting, and the August FBI search, the question is what happened? What triggered the FBI search? I just sat down with former National Security Advisor John Bolton here in Washington, to be sure, a Trump critic. But he said it suggests possibly that something of high national security concern that could have been in these documents was of note to the investigators. Because if something's down in Mar-a-Lago where a former president is living and it's top secret or sensitive compartmented information, the Justice Department, we're told by sources, could be concerned about foreign intelligence maybe having access to the property, or that information that the former president brought down just somehow not being secure. You keep seeing the former president referencing in his statements that he has put locks on that material down in Florida.
And Catherine, President Trump has been saying on social media that, hey, if the FBI had wanted these documents, they could have just asked me and I would have handed them over. But the timeline that Bob just laid out suggests that they tried that avenue and didn't get all the documents that they wanted.
Some of those who are close to the former president believe that there's been a misrepresentation about a breakdown in the communication, that from their point of view, they felt that things were going along pretty well and that there was a good, healthy dialogue. But that's going to be litigated in the court here. The other big issue is going to be this issue of classification. The President of the United States is the ultimate declassification authority. So they have the authority, if they work through the proper channels, they can't just wave a wand and declassify information, whether those steps were taken here for every one of the documents. So you're going to need to put your reading glasses on and get real familiar with SAP and SCI and top secret. I mean, this is the kind of discussion it's going to come down to, and intent. That will be very important.
Just to build on that, such an important point, Catherine. Was this FBI search something prompted, and we still don't know this, by their concern of criminal intent by the former president to somehow misuse or abuse his power as a former president and take these documents? Or was it because of concern of some national security issue or vulnerability? For the Attorney General to speak out this week on an ongoing investigation, highly unusual, almost historic. At the same time, we still don't have enough information about where this investigation is and where it's going.
We're definitely in uncharted waters. Thanks to both of you, Bob Costa, Catherine Herridge. Appreciate you breaking it down for us. Our coverage will continue on CBS News Streaming, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington.